Salam alaikum. Greetings from Malta to everyone. I wish to thank you, Professor Hashem, and the team of organizers for giving me the possibility to present to you today. My topic will be on resilience, and I would like to revisit the topic resilience today with you, because the pandemic has caused so much change in our lifestyles, and it affected so many people around the globe. Everybody has to deal with losses, with situations which are unprecedented. So therefore, I think the topic is very, very fitting. The term resilience originates actually in physics, and it refers to a material ability to restore its former shape after being bent, squeezed, or stretched. But the question I pose is, do we really bounce back to our original state of mind? Apologies, there are some technical glitches when the slides fall. I will look at this topic from different perspectives. First of all, I would like to address general and current contextual factors. And then I would look into the resilience with regards to vulnerability and the social cultural impact. And then I move to resilience building and intercultural aspects in clinical work. Let's get started. General contextual factors that lead to the formation of resilience, which gives us the ability to withstand or to bounce back from adversity, whatever life throws at us, are in a way that human cognition is one of the great factors. Human cognition is constructed in such a way that it can adapt to new difficulties posed by changing circumstances, the researchers Major and his friends discovered. But in one way, I would say in one way or the other, because it didn't state whether it's pathologic or in a healthy way to adapt, because the person always uses strategies to cope, but whether they are healthy or not, we will see in just a minute. The resilience in itself is a constitution of multiple factors. So the network factors, which is the external support factor, that is where the person says, I have. Then abilities and skills, which is the internal factor, internal support, I can. Meaning making, values and faith, which is the existential support, which makes us say, I am. And how this is related to the current state, we have to examine these factors. So when we see clients, it is very important to say what is the quality of external support that makes a person say, I have, or where a person confidently can say, I have. Do I have or don't I have? Then the abilities and skills, we need to address that in our examination when we diagnose about abilities and skills, where the patient can say, I can. Can the patient say, I can, or is there something missing? And then meaning making. How does the person make meaning, the existential issues, which forms the I am of the person? So we have three components here where we can look at in a therapeutic, before we devise therapeutic interventions, into these three aspects. Resilience is based on several categories, which I explained right now, but one of the most important resilience factors is the internal self factor. So Kumpfer, as a matter of fact, she threw a light on these factors and she created two subcategories. One is the spirituality, the cognitive competency, or I would also add the cognitive flexibility, because it's not enough to have a cognitive competency, but it is also, we look also at the quality, how flexible is our cognitive ability, then our emotional stability. Then she looks into behavioral and social skills. It is not enough to only be cognitively competent, but also to see how does this affect our behavior and our attitude towards others as human beings or social beings. Resilience in itself is not a one-off acquired issue, but resilience is a lifelong process of acquiring abilities to deal with adversity and solve issues. So resilience is also a subset of mental health processes that exist independently of the presence or absence of a condition. So that means to say, when we have resilience, we can alter the condition we are having in a positive, or it can affect it also not in a pathologic way. Resilience and vulnerability, as you think already, when we talk, all the issues all the issues I mentioned before are related to a normal coping strategy too. But what about the vulnerable among us? What a bit about the people with different abilities? When we speak about social and cultural impact, we do not only speak about different nationalities, different ethnicities, different races. We also speak about the different contexts. And for example, we can have the culture of Down syndrome in this case. We talk in the culture of the norm of the general population, which are not suffering of that. We can speak about the culture of medics. We can speak about the culture of architects. So it is not only related to the way to different nationalities and races. The present global epidemic exemplifies, for example, how these cultures, which I just referred to, reorganize itself and in response to changing situations in our society. And this actually poses a massive challenge for the vulnerable population among our patients, which we can just now see as exemplified in Sarah, who is a 52-year-old patient with Down syndrome. Now, Sarah lives and works in a home where she joins a community, a mixed community between carers and fellow Down syndrome people like her. And as COVID broke out, the wearing of masks became mandatory in that space. But Sarah, she hated the mask with a passion. And she stopped going to work. She loved to go to the workshop. She loved her creative work. She enjoyed the community, but not so this time around. So she stopped going to work. She stayed in her room. She refused to eat. She couldn't sleep any longer. So what happened really? It was clear that the sudden change affected Sarah to a great extent, but how did it affect? First of all, the mask wearing was not introduced conducive to the situation of Down syndromes, because as we know, the cognitive flexibility is not as the cognitive flexibility a normal person or a person who does not suffer with the Down syndrome has. So this hasn't been taken into consideration. So there was not a cultural adaptation from the carers or from the persons who are responsible, from the policymakers, that that gave this mandate to wear masks and how mask wearing was introduced. Then also what happened is that Sarah was deprived of information. It means to say that she couldn't see the smile anymore. She couldn't gauge anything from her environment because everybody was hiding behind the mask, which made her very frightened, which caused a great level. Sarah was prone in itself to anxiety and overwhelm, because Down syndromes have to cope with the life in itself, which is overwhelming at times. So it accelerated the conditions massively. So what happened is that she suffered of a sensory aversion. With it came that the problem, she was not properly understood and it was not properly taken care of, adequately taken care of. So to reverse the Sarah's condition into making her feel better, it needs endurance, as a matter of fact. You need to, for example, Down syndrome who have a sensory aversion, mask wearing needs to be started slow and provide lots of praise for wearing the mask, positive feedback, and by wearing the mask properly. And it needs to have the endurance of patience, because masks can only be tolerated for seconds while she rips it off, and it needs to be repeated and repeated. So there is a time factor. There is a factor of resources, of capacity of the carers to sit with people and to train with them adequately. So, and we need to understand that we need to build up endurance with cases like Sarah's. The level, this example shows that the level of resilience reflects a person's cognitive flexibility and the formal or informal social network's ability to promote positive growth under stress. Resilience factors, can they be protective factors or can they turn into risk factors? Depending on the context, resilience can appear as a pro-social or as a pathologic adaptation. For example, a very classical example is a strong family cohesion. Usually, a strong family cohesion is considered as a positive and protective factor, which contributes to resilience building. But what if the strong family cohesion consists of a dysfunctional family? Dysfunctional in the sense when the client or the patient is exposed to alcohol and drug abuse in the family, to violence in the family. So that what was supposed to be a safe haven is not safe anymore. So we cannot take this resilience factor from the family support for granted. So what it needs then is to fall back on other factors that support resilience development. Now let's have a closer look in how the pandemic affects on behavior. There is, for example, the arousal-motivated coping type person, which leads to a dismissive avoidance circle. Arousal-motivated coping, individuals who are more prone to stress-induced emotional arousal are more likely to engage in cognitive avoidance on a regular basis. The primary goal of avoidance tactics is to protect the individual from a rise of arousal. Means to say, the person will always avoid anything that elicits pain or elicits discomfort. So when you have a patient like that, it will not talk about their own relation to what the person is witnessing. The person will come with another patient to you and will talk about the son who is suffering. And we'll talk about anything else or blame other points that to the cause of his stress. So avoidant tactics is likely to have an increased level of therapy resistance, but it is very important to acknowledge that, to apply immediacy, and to notice what you're seeing, to address the issue with the client. It means to say, I see you are not feeling comfortable whenever this topic comes up. So what is behind that? It is very important to apply immediacy in that sense. Then another very known and common effect of behavior is the uncertainty motivating coping, because the pandemic has elicited a huge level of uncertainty, and people have to deal with intractable risks. So this increases paranoia. If somebody is a paranoid or a suspicious person in itself, hypervigilancy is actually the result. It is accelerated. So then the vigilant strategist is an individual who particularly is impacted by uncertainty and in a majority of stressful situations. So they're reacting highly likely to the uncertainty, and they use a vigilant coping on a regular basis. The vigilant coping can be also eliciting heightened levels on OCD, checking 20,000 times if the door is closed, if the sanitizer is in, the hand washing, which is anyway a problem. It is accelerated to that extent that social isolation out of fear of infection can also come into play. Thus, their vigilance is guided by a strategy aimed at reducing the likelihood of unanticipated occurrences of aversive events. As we have seen, a human cognition is constructed in such a way that it can adapt to new difficulties posed by changing circumstances. And it is relevant in its intercultural interventions to explore if active coping is a quality that is consistent across different types of stressful events, or whether it is a stressful induced reaction triggered by a combination of personality traits and certain types of stressful situations in itself. Let us move now to the clinical intercultural aspects of resilience building and how we can work towards resilience building. So we are not only working on coping with the traits, but coping with what to do with maladaptive traits. And in this regard, we need to look at clinical intercultural therapist interaction that comprises awareness and knowledge of values, norms, rules, and ways of life that both the therapist and the patient get from the generations before us, and how every new generation integrates and adapts these to their own lives and societies. So because the therapist, we mustn't forget that the therapist and the client always sits in one boat. More often than not, the therapist takes him or herself out of the equation, which is not really good, because in that way you don't really adequately connect with the client, and you cannot get the message from your gut, and the ability to apply immediacy is reduced. In an intercultural clinical encounter, the process of meaning making is dynamic and interpersonal. Certain parts of an individual's identity become more or less prominent at any given moment, depending on the presence or absence of certain social interactions and social settings. So it is very important to be able to step into the client's shoes, and also to not to put our shoes completely aside and see how is the interaction at that moment, the quality of the present interaction shaped. Cultures are constructed by people's needs, experiences, and insights. So as this is the case, do we really bounce back to our original state of mind? In this case, we look also at dynamic and static factors. Parts of our culture are modified as a result of interactions with our civilizations and rapid technological advancements. Before we lived in a social world, now we are living more and more in our virtual reality. Some cultural traditions are being abandoned due to new understanding, such, for example, as corporal punishment. In the Western world, this is now illegal. Our concept of what constitutes good parenting and sound education has also shifted. Culture changes are speeding up due to greater migration and global interaction. So do we really bounce back to our original state of mind? Language, for example, also keeps evolving to incorporate new knowledge and influences from other languages, which has a great impact on identity and meaning making. So the way we speak to others, the language we use, we talk to ourselves, the demands we are having due to that what we are exposed to, everything needs to be taken into consideration. But we also have static factors. And this is a level where we can start intervening, when we can start our therapy plan and our intervention with the client, when we look at these 7 universal static factors, which are the universal needs, which are needs across cultures and across attitudes and behavior settings. Everyone has the need to survive, they need to belong, they need to find purpose, they need to move from a felt minus to a felt plus, because we all want to move out from a negative state of mind. And the need for safety and to protect life. I mean, even, for example, a depressed person, in order to avoid the negative state of mind, they withdraw and sleep. Because when I sleep, I don't need to feel. The need to safety, to protect life, that is very prominent. So here, this one is a very important issue, to start creating a safe space, much more than analyzing what problems the person has. The first and foremost duty we have as mental health workers is to create a safe space where the client can elaborate with the therapist or with the medic the problem. And the need for energy. We have the need for energy and the need to know something about life and death. This is existential needs are very, very important to address, especially in times of the pandemic. In conclusion, rather than considering resilience as something an individual possesses, it is important to recognize that resilience is the individual's ability for growth, which is stimulated by the environment. To fully comprehend clinical intercultural processes, it is necessary to consider both the historic, traditional, and the dynamic perspectives. With this, I would like to conclude and end my presentation, and I thank you for your kind attendance.